Welcome to the American Small Business League podcast. I am Bruce Taurus, and with me is Jonathan Harris, who's running as a Democrat for Congress in Florida in the 16th District. Before I read more about you, John, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Bruce, how about yourself?
I'm excited to talk to you. Your website is John Harris for Congress. That's Jon Harris for FOR Congress.com. And John is a proud U.S. Army veteran who has a career, I think, still active or in reserve that would span nearly 2 decades across active duty and reserve service. And you're also a technology professional. I'll let you pick up from there. First part of this show is going to be all about you and your campaign. Tell me all about you and why you're running, and then we'll talk about our small business issues, John. So talk to me. I'm all ears.
Awesome. So thank you, Bruce. I appreciate that. Yes, um, 20 years actually next year in the Army. I actually joined when I was 20. I'm now 39. So yeah, we're approaching that 20-year mark. Getting ready for transition into retirement. But yes, so I do reserve work for the military. I'm actually stationed at MacDill in Tampa Bay, and I'm also a technology contractor for US SOCOM. So I kind of dual hat there and do work for the military in both ways, right? Um, my campaign. So I guess that comes down to why I'm running, right? So for me, I got to a point to where I felt Congress wasn't really working. And, what I mean by that, right? Congress, is supposed to be a co-equal branch of government. When we talk about, the three branches of government, legislative, executive, and judicial, right? Congress is supposed to be co-equal. They're supposed to be able to, come up with appropriation bills and, budgets and, do the things that the legislature should do. And we've gotten to a point to where Congress no longer functions for the people that it's intended to serve. It functions more as a political echo chamber for whoever's in office. So if you have a Republican president and you have a Democratic legislature, then nothing really gets done. And if you have both of them together, matched up, Democrat and Democrat, or Republican Republican, you end up getting everything fast tracked and nothing actually gets debated on. Nothing actually gets talked about in committees like it's supposed to, right? So for me, I got to a point to where I really felt like we're missing the representation part of Congress, and we're only kind of doing what's best for party, and those two objectives don't always align. Democratic objectives and Republican objectives. Yeah, we have differing ways that we want to go about kind of getting policy, done or passed. Um, but I think that the party has become the central focal point, the focal point for governance, and not the people that we are supposed to represent. So here in Florida's congressional District 16, we are representing a kind of conglomerate of Hillsborough and Manatee County. And that spans from Brandon, Florida, all the way down into Bradenton. And we have a lot of beautiful, beach areas, and it's a very diverse population. But it's also a population that has a lot of veterans and it has a lot of retirees. So we're and I'm pretty sure you've heard it on the show. This podcast. I watched several of your podcasts before I came on. Pretty sure you've heard it. We're in kind of affordability crisis in America, and people aren't able to afford, the extra things in life, to enjoy their retirement or to, enjoy a weekend out at the beach with the family because things have gotten prohibitively expensive. So what I would like to do is I'd like to help with that. And, being a veteran, that's very near and dear to my heart. So I want to make sure that my veterans are taken care of. When it comes to going to the VA to get their healthcare benefits, I want them to be able to, get rid of the bureaucracy and the red tape and just get the help that they need. It's by that same token, when we talk about healthcare for the broader populace, right? For retirees, when we talk about Medicare and Medicaid, we shouldn't be, cutting these programs. We should be trying to find ways to find efficiencies within government, but not necessarily, cutting almost $1 billion out of the national budget, right? So I think about those things a lot, and how we can kind of, provide a better way forward and actually truly represent those constituents who we're supposed to be serving. So that's primarily what got me to run, and then kind of like my wife says I'm kind of dumb for doing it, but like put myself out there and kind of make this push to do better. And just by that token, right? So the person who's been sitting in the seat for I think somewhere between 15 and 17 years is Vern Buchanan. He's the sixth richest person in Congress. Does he really understand what it's like to go to the grocery store and have to, forego this product or that product? I don't think that that's the case for him anymore. I think that, while we had the government shutdown, he was able to still afford everything that he was able to afford before, because he's got millions and millions of dollars. Contrary to popular belief, I am not a millionaire. Not by any stretch of the imagination. Sure, I've done well in my professional career and my military career, but yeah, I'm just like the people I'm trying to represent. So
Thank you. That was really nice. I heard, affordability, the cost of living. I heard concern for the veterans care, particularly through the VA. I think it was healthcare, the third prominent thing you mentioned.
yeah, healthcare for all, right?
Okay,
That's
okay.
a big thing, and that kind of
Yeah,
goes into that affordability.
thank you. Yeah, I want to ask just a little bit more about the work you've been doing for the last, 19 years or so. Um, in the military, it's technology or a technology specialist. And what there's a second agency or something that you work for two agencies right now. I didn't catch the word you said that was. What was that?
Sorry. So let's just start at the beginning. I actually joined the military. I was not a information technology specialist or a cybersecurity professional. I actually joined as a frontline soldier, an infantryman, when I was 20. And I went on one combat deployment in Iraq, and I lost, one of my best friends in an IED explosion, and that kind of changed my perspective, if you will, about me continuing forward in that profession. So I got out of active duty and went into the reserves. And as a reservist, I had to change my duty, my MOS, uh, which is military occupation specialty. So I had to change that from infantryman to, I think at the time I was trying to be an MP, a military police officer, but they didn't have any slots available. So they put me in a information technology track, and I, just kind of stuck with it. So I went from doing that as an enlisted soldier, and then I want to say in 2021 I was accepted into the Warrant Officer cohort. So I became a Warrant Officer in the United States Army Reserve. As a network operations warrant officer. So I specialize in computer networking and computer network engineering. So I build computer networks for, small to medium sized enterprises or whatever the military needs of me at the time. So that's my
Thank you.
military profession. My civilian profession, I work for Headquarters Special Operations Command. So I said US SOCOM. So that's where I work, again, on base. And I work for them as a government contractor. And I specialize in information security, cybersecurity, with a specific focus in risk management. So I look at IT systems from a risk perspective.
Thank you. I'm enough of a student of history and current events to be convinced of the overreaching nature of surveillance since 9/11 and the Department of Homeland Security. And what have you seen, or what do you participate in, John, that might bump up against our constitutional rights?
That's hard to say because with the military, there are kind of like rules of engagement, especially with what can be done, towards U.S. citizens. So it really is kind of hard to say in my particular, I guess, lane, because I'm mostly focused on the risk that's associated to the enterprise as it pertains to an information system, right? So if I have a system that is, um, let's say you're using, Windows, right? Well, I have to identify and highlight all of the risks that are associated with using Windows. Does it call back to home? Is it what data is it, giving to Microsoft as a whole? So I think my focus has been a little bit in a different area.
Well, I appreciate that, and that's actually good news. And also, if you were and the enterprises you support, do you know how the military uses them, or are you simply, deep in the nuts and bolts, to use a metaphor from last century? So you don't know who the military is deploying this technology on or against, do you?
So that is one of the things that I have to do is I have to understand how the technology is being used and in what, I guess, situations or scenarios it is being used. So I think that that's very important to understanding risk and being able to quantify that in a meaningful way to the people who make decisions on whether or not to go forward with a piece of technology. So I think that I
Yeah.
have to know.
Well, then, last question before digging more into your campaign, your goals, and questions about your district and the future of your campaign, and hopefully your first term in Congress. To what extent are you aware that the military is deploying any technology effort to surveil American citizens?
Again, I go back to there are rules against that. So for me, and especially again going into what I do, I'm not necessarily privy to anything that's happening in that realm. So if there is surveillance happening on U.S. soil, those are not systems that I work on or highlight risk on. So
Okay.
it'd be hard for
Yeah.
me to say.
Well, yeah, we can't say what we don't know, and I'm very grateful for your patience in dealing with my questions that might seem paranoid to some people, but they're not. They are legitimate concerns given, the full spectrum dominance that the Pentagon for decades has been bragging about seeking in its surveillance worldwide. It's a fair question. But back to Florida, back to the 16th district, back to your path for the next year or so. Do you have a primary between now and the general next November?
I actually do.
Yeah.
I have a primary. There were, I think, four of us in contention on the Democratic side. I think one of them has issues with the being able to qualify, so I think he's going to move into being an independent. And there are two other people. One of them has run for this seat, I think, three, maybe four times, but has come up short. And that may be she's just not resonating with the voters. And, to be fair, she is a little bit, more seasoned in her career. But I think that the kind of emphasis, moving forward is, people of my age, and like I said, I'm only 39, but people of my age want a seat at the table. And we want to be able to steer, policy moving forward into the next couple of decades, right? So,
Mhm.
my intent isn't to get into Congress and then, just stay there, right? But I do want to have a voice and a platform to be able to kind of shape and leave it maybe better than the way I found it. And right now, I just feel like we're not at a point to where Congress is doing the things that it should be doing.
Right. And the Buchanan you mentioned, he's the incumbent.
He is.
He's a Republican.
He is.
You said he's been there about 15 years.
I want to say it's between 15 and 17 years.
Okay, sure, 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 sure. What on your website do you steer people to the most or first?
Well, right now, my campaign is actually just starting to ramp up. So you caught me at a point in time where I'm actually just starting to get to a point to where I'm actually going to revamp the website. I got it up and running, I think, a couple of weeks back. I'm going to revamp it and try and bring it more into line with what people can expect from my campaign, and then highlight issues that are important to me. Again, I go back to veterans issues as being, near and dear to my heart, healthcare, and then obviously trying to find ways that we can make living in this district more affordable. I think even though I think the median household income for this district is like $81,000 a year, and that sounds great, but if the prices of homes keep skyrocketing because big companies are coming in and buying up all the houses,
Hmm.
well, that $81,000 a year isn't really much, right? So trying to find ways to make that more affordable.
Yeah, and the towns you mentioned, Floridians will know exactly where you are, but you've early said, I think Tampa. So, what you described is that on the Gulf Coast, up in the bend there in the elbow of the coast.
So this is going to be the Gulf Coast, but it's going to kind of be central in
Okay,
Florida.
okay.
So the Tampa Bay area, it does sit, right on the Gulf, and we
Hmm.
enjoy our Gulf. Anna Maria Island sits right there.
Hmm.
That's very beautiful. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, it's like I said, central Florida. It's not going to be, and that's on
Right.
the western
Right.
coast of Florida.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
Well, thanks. Yeah, and we had written you, and you gave a very positive reply, and it led to your invitation to talk on the show here about particularly our small business issues. We're very unique at the American Small Business League, just to get every viewers up to speed. Um, we focus on the federal contracts that are supposed to go to small businesses, as you know, and we accuse the federal government for really misleading us by telling us that every year 23% of federal contracts go to small businesses the way that they're supposed to. We've got decades of experience, and there are congressional investigations, and people can learn all about it at our site, asbl.com, that show that no, in reality, almost all federal contracts go to the 0.1% of businesses that are big business, including almost all the contracts that are supposed to go to small businesses. And the problem with that, John, as you know, is we are a small business nation. 99.9% of all businesses in America are small businesses. But we see them getting about 3 or 4% of federal contracts, not 23% like they're supposed to, meaning 0.1% of all businesses. The big businesses are getting 96, 97% of federal contracts. And one of the biggest problems about that is they're already big businesses. They don't create one new job to perform that work. Whereas small businesses would create about 2 million new jobs on top of the 2 million that America typically produces every single year, an economic stimulus, an economic boom of epic proportions. And we also wrote you about our don'tcheatwomen.com project, where we want to raise from 5 to 15% the federal contracts that are supposed to go to women owned small businesses, because women are half the population, obviously, but they own 40% of all the businesses in America. And it's not charity. They make and sell what the government buys. And yet the law says they're supposed to get only 95% of federal contracts. And in reality, we see them getting less than 1% every year because of all that fudging and all the loopholes and all the corruption that lets big businesses get the federal contracts anyway. And not only is that not fair, and then I want your thoughts about all these things, particularly about small businesses and this issue on a silver platter we want to give you and all candidates to run on, to get convinced about, and to teach. Hey, listen, one of the things I'm going to do when I get there is work to get equity and fairness for women-owned small businesses because of the great prosperity it would create with new jobs, but also these benefits for women. Men earn and save more. They have more political power. Men do, because they earn and save more. They contribute more to politicians. They've got more influence just as donors, but they also can run for and they win office much more than women. 75% of all seats in the House, the Senate, state legislatures, every president's cabinet are men. They sit in almost that many governor chairs, and they occupy 90% of all committee chair and party leadership positions. So women are not political equals because they simply can't compete economically for political office until they can earn and are worth as much as men. And they're doing well by some measures. They're graduating with more higher degrees. Women, I believe, are actually starting more businesses than men. But here at this federal contracting level, why, oh, why in 2025 is it okay that men get 95% of federal contracts when, like I said, women sell what the government buys? And it's worth mentioning that the federal government is the world's largest purchaser of goods and services on the planet, somewhere between 800 billion and 1.5 trillion dollars a year in goods and services the federal government buys. So if you Google this, you're going to think, well, Bruce is wrong. You have to go to our site, asbl.com, to see our decades of legal victories and the congressional investigations and the inspector general reports from the SBA, who administers the contracts and certifies and says, oh, small businesses are getting all the contracts that they're supposed to. No, we want to challenge you or invite you to scrutinize this, John, to get convinced about it, and then test it in your campaign. See if, wow, that resonates with voters to the extent it's only worthwhile if you see that it would help you win. That was the gist of the nice big letter that we had emailed you, and it led to this conversation. So talk to me about those things, small businesses, but what do you make about what I just shared?
Yeah, I think that that's really, it's definitely something that needs to be kind of scrutinized, like you said, and we're fortunate to have watchdogs, kind of making sure that these things aren't going unchallenged, right? Like,
Mm.
hey, look, the government says this, but this is what's actually happening, and I've seen firsthand, not necessarily in my current role, but as a military service member, I've seen firsthand these contracts, being awarded, and you know the game, right? Like they're either subcontracted out, they're awarded, subcontracted out, and that's just how it goes. But what you said is true. I think if we go back to actually defining these small businesses, appropriately, uh, then you get to a point to where, yes, these small businesses are going to grow, they're going to thrive, they're going to hire more staff to accommodate what's being asked, as opposed to these big companies that already have these people on staff. So they're not really generating any new extra jobs, they're just putting to work people that they already have on staff. So I completely agree with you there. And then going into don't cheat women, I'm actually really happy you kind of mentioned that. I've seen firsthand, again, how women are underrepresented, not just in our government, but also when it comes to getting salaries, getting like you said, these contracts. I've seen a man bid for a job and get paid 30%, 40% more than his female counterpart. And this is a systemic thing that just continues to happen as we go through, like you said, those government contracts, right? So I definitely feel like these are important issues, and that's definitely something that I would definitely bring to Washington if, I say if, when I get elected, we're going to manifest it, right?
Right.
And when I get elected, is to make sure that we're trying to get these initiatives pushed, because this representation is important. And like you said, if 40% of these businesses are owned by women and they're only getting so much percent of the pie, then how does that really square, right? Like, so I'm definitely an advocate, 100%.
Thank you. Yeah, because, our foot in the door is to talk about the women contracting. We call it ending discrimination against women in federal contracting. That's how we describe our Don't Cheat Women project. And back to you and your campaign. This is your first campaign for office, I think, right?
Yes, that is my first campaign.
And money is such a huge factor. If someone comes from deep pockets or has a lot of money behind them, they have an incredible advantage, even in their, first campaign. This is your first campaign. What are you doing? What do you have in terms of those kind of resources? What kind of backing? And if not, how are you? What are you leveraging in order to become branded in the minds of the majority of voters in your district?
Well, again, Bruce, I think it comes down to, like you said, those resources are really important. And I think when I approached this initially, I knew that it would be an uphill climb because, like I said, Vern Buchanan, he's a multimillionaire. And I think when I last looked at the numbers, I think he had somewhere in the neighborhood of about $1 million on hand, something of that nature. So I definitely have to kind of step up my game and get to that level. But first, I'm kind of citing myself on becoming a known quantity within this district, right? As a military service member, I've only been, just doing my civil service, right? I've only been doing that. Service to this nation for the last 19 years. But now I'm trying to transition and become more active politically. And that takes time, and that takes, kind of, being at events, being in the community, and making those connections and those relationships. So that's primarily what I've been focusing on, as like I said, I've just started. So doing that is my key focus, and then moving into next year as we transition into January and February, we're really going to start kind of being more aggressive and pushing to get these donors to see that I'm worth that investment. Not even just for the primary, but beyond the primary, right? I
Mm.
think that people want somebody who's going to bring a fresh perspective and
Mm.
be able to not just be a Democratic voice in Congress, but be a voice for all. I think
Yeah.
that's really important.
Well, it would have to be because you're competing with a district that has sent a Republican there for the last 15 or so years. So your solutions have to make sense to that majority of the voters. Um, who are you? Do you have advisors? Do you have veterans of political campaigns? How are you studying or modeling a successful campaign?
So I think that comes down to a lot of study of some of the people who are already in Congress, and obviously these are going to be Democratic names. So your Maxwell Frost, he's out in Orlando, and then your AOCs. And I specifically kind of am trying to, study what I can from their campaigns because they've been so successful at such young ages. And I'm older than they are, right? But I do think that there's something that can be learned from that.
Mm-hmm.
And then outside of that, I'm also working with a local team down in Bradenton who kind of sees value in me as a candidate, and they've been willing to kind of give me some free chicken, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to be working with me moving into the next year and trying to obviously generate that aggressive kind of push to become a known quantity, not just here in Hillsborough County, because like I
Mm-hmm.
said, this campaign or this district encompasses Hillsborough County and Manatee County, which is just south of me. So I reside personally in Hillsborough County, so I may be a little bit more known in the military circles. So that works for me here. But Manatee County is a whole nother monster itself, and that's where Vern Buchanan kind of has his flag firmly planted. So I do need to make sure that I am not just, a known quantity here, but also in Manatee as well.
Right, right. Are those kind of media consultants or political consultants? Can you describe what those kind of folks are?
Yeah, so they are, it's a professional, sorry, a public relations team.
Mm-hmm.
They are, I'm not working with them, officially, but like I said, they do see value in my campaign. So they are, kind of giving me some, free advice. They're helping me kind of strategize. And then I think once I've started to get a little bit more money in the door as I go to these events and go talk to
Mm-hmm.
donors, I think that we're going to make that a more official contract and obviously have them helping me push the campaign forward moving into 2026.
As you've studied the incumbents that you mentioned and maybe others, can you share, without giving away a competitive advantage, the top one or two things that you heard or saw or picked up? Like, I want to do that. That sounded like it works.
Um, I guess it would be hard to say. I think as I've looked at their campaigns, I think that they had a little bit more connection to the political sphere than I did. So I think that's hard to emulate. I think what I try and emulate a little bit more is that drive and that ambition. Even though, I may not have had, let's say, a good outing, or, that event that I went to, I don't feel like it got me, the leads that I needed, or the relation. I didn't get, enough relationships built during that thing. I think taking away the drive and ambition that they both had in their campaigns. And, I think at one point AOC was doing a kind of like a podcast or a video series where she was, talking, she was like, hey, look, I'm broke. I went and, went to work, but now I have a networking event I got to go to, and I'm out, but she puts on that persona, and she's full-time go, right? Same with me. I'm not just a soldier or a information security analyst. I'm also a husband. I'm a father of two beautiful girls, and sometimes I have to balance those things and do the campaigning, right? So
Mhm.
I still have to put on that go face, and I still have to get out there and make myself known and build those relationships. So I think the drive and ambition is the thing that I take away most from their campaigns as I've studied them.
And I'll submit to you, maybe you've heard this before. I still believe this is true. The candidate wins who is the first to have asked a voter, "Hi, I'm John Harris. I'm running for office. Will you consider voting for me? Can I have your vote?" Personally, handshaking, look in the eye, and asking. So you will do fine because you just can't sleep between now and the primary, and then you can't sleep in between now and the general, because you've got to meet and ask for the vote from every voting age person in your district. And the go face you mentioned reminds me of what President John F. Kennedy called the BP, the big personality, because he was a shy, introverted intellectual, kind of a low key guy in real life, but he had to give speeches, and he was a politician for 15, 16, 17 years, whatever it was. So, and before he went on stage or in front of the camera, he knew he had to go into the BP, the big personality, boom, So I relate to what you're talking about. What would you add? What would you clarify? What would you embellish before we wrap this up, John?
Um, I really think we kind of touched on all of that, and I do appreciate you kind of giving me the time and the platform to kind of introduce myself to those who don't know me. I
Mhm.
think that for those who do, they know that I'm an honest, hardworking person, and I a little I obsess sometimes about getting things done. So trust me, I if when I'm elected, I will make sure that we're doing the things that we need to do to kind of right the ship and get Congress back on equal footing with the other two branches of government, right? And I think that's very important. Is that especially as a representative in the House of Representatives, we're the closest to our constituents, and we need to get back to that. So rather than representing my party, and I know I have a D behind my name, so I do represent democratic values, but a vote for me is not just a vote for a Democrat. A vote for me is a vote for somebody who's going to do what's in the best interest of everybody, regardless of what's on your voter's registration card. So I think that that's very important. And like you said, I have to reach a broader audience than just the Democrats. So yeah, I think that's about it.
Well, and kudos to you, and I want to thank you on behalf of, how desperately America needs a House of Representatives filled with people who really want to work for the people of their district. And it's urgent. By many measures, the house is on fire. By many measures, we're at the edge of many cliffs if we haven't already gone over them. By many measures, we've got overhangs of unbelievable bubbles, debt, financial bubbles, economic bubbles that could burst any second.
Yep.
There are many informed people, John, who think every day with electricity and hot running water is a good day because it could all go down the drain in the blink of an eye. That's how fragile the institutions of politics, economics, and society, and cultural and education, medicine, pharmaceutical, infrastructure. It's drop dead serious, and that you're taking it on. And when you talk from the heart, as you clearly can do, and remind folks, you're going to represent them, your district. Boom. You've got every chance for success because I don't think Congress has ever had lower approval ratings, and that would include an incumbent of 14, 15 years, whomever you're running against. So you're taking on a sacred and exciting opportunity, and best to you with that. I didn't say it for folks to go to don'tcheatwomen.com too explicitly. I want everybody to do that. You too, to really study over and over and over again these issues that might be kind of new to you still, and to just wrap everyone's head around. Yeah, I want to send John there. I want to send representatives there and senators who will tell the truth about where these federal contracts are going, because when they really go to small businesses, we'll have a lot of new jobs and we'll have economic prosperity. And it's really, really, really important. So thank you very much for your time, John. And stay with me after I kill the recording. But I want to thank everybody for watching and listening today.